So I think we'll go ahead and get started. First of all, thank you for agreeing to do this. Your last book was amazing. And this one, if anything, is even better. It was a total page turner. I know that many of my close personal friends bought it and loved it. Some of them are joining today, and welcome to everyone who's on as an audience member. You are welcome to submit questions through the chat or Q&A function, and then I'm happy to relate them as we go. But look, it was a real treat to discuss The Floating Feldmans with you last year. We're so grateful that you're here again today. And for those of you who haven't had the chance to read the book, in the last summer at the Golden Hotel, you tell the story of two families who create a hotel in the Catskills, or the Jewish Alps, as you call it, their family secrets and the unraveling of some of those secrets. What was your basic inspiration for the book? How did you choose the Catskills? Had you ever been there before?
So, well, first of all, thank you so much. You can hear me?
Great.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. I'm always happy to do something for Fifth Avenue Synagogue. It's like, this is an hour of my time, but my husband spends 20 hours a week working for the synagogue. So this is really a fraction of what, he's doing. But I'm obviously we love the shul, and I feel great. And it's also like such a Jewish novel that to share it with a shul, it's like, it's so meant to be,
Yes. Yeah.
Um, but anyway, so a little background on the book. I mean, you certainly summarized the plot, but my third book, which I also spoke about with Fifth Avenue, um, was an intergenerational Jewish family on a cruise ship for the week, and I found like not only did it resonate with readers a tremendous amount, it was what I enjoyed writing the most. Like, and that's really important because, naturally, I care a lot about my readers enjoying the book. But writing a book is a lot of work, and I have to spend a really long time with these characters and working, and so I want to enjoy it. And I really enjoy writing about Jewish families. And so it was sort of a natural extension, from the Floating Feldmans. Like, I don't want to write the same book twice. So what can I do that will enable me to have like a multiple point of view book, multi-generational, but not write the same book twice? And I decided, with my agent and my editor, like we settled on, a hotel setting, because hotels are like, for a writer, like much like a cruise ship, gives you a lot of material to work with. Like, so does a hotel. Like, a hotel has a bunch of regulars. Hotels have like history, they have key players, they have, staff that's quirky, and they have secrets, and any sort of business. But a hotel is like a really rich business, for good stories. And the Catskills, again, obviously very Jewish, and really good for like honing in on the intergenerational themes of the book, because it was like a place that had its heyday a long time ago, and now it's, the Borscht Belt is no longer. And it really, just thinking about that and why the Catskills declined, like it raises all these issues of like what appeals to the different generations, and what, and the region means very different things to different people depending on like their personal experiences with the place. And like, to be like totally slightly flippant, but like not totally, I also love Dirty Dancing.
Right.
And
Same.
I mean, everyone loves that movie, and it's really stood the test of time. Like, rewatching it, for book research, just to like, for inspiration. I'm like, this movie is just as good as when I saw it in the 80s. Like, I can't get enough of it. Like, the soundtrack and the setting, it's so good, and people are really, really attached to that movie. So to write anything that like is evocative of Dirty Dancing is very good for getting readers' attention.
Right. So I saw the acknowledgments that you said your mom had gone there when she was younger. Had you ever been to the Catskills? I never have. But that said, as I read the book, I really felt like there's a little bit of Catskills in all of us.
It's funny, a lot of people, which is such a great compliment, are like, "Oh, I feel like I was there. I feel like I really know the Catskills." And so many people were like, "Now I'm dying to go." And it's funny because I wasn't presenting the Catskills, especially the Catskills of today. I wasn't presenting it as like the most unbelievable vacation spot, like where it's so, everything is so top shelf and spectacular. It wasn't like I was describing this like rainforest beach with perfect weather that everyone's like dying to pack their suitcase. And yet people finish the book and were like, I read a lot of my reviews and the book the Bookstagram audience on Instagram, and they write a lot about, my book, and they take pictures with it, and they write their thoughts. And like, so many are like, I'm dying to go to the Catskills. And I'm like, how interesting. Because it wasn't like I was like describing, the south of France, and yet there was
Right.
something about the place that, like, the way it was described, and the nostalgia, and the special feeling there, that made people want to go there. So my mom did go there every summer of her childhood, although she didn't really like talk about it very much, until I started working on the book and I asked her questions, and she spoke so highly of her time there. It was like very special time in her life. Like, she looked forward to her summers there, and it was traditional back then that, like, she would go with her mom and her sister, and her father would drive up on Fridays before Shabbat, and he would leave late Sunday night. Like, that's, it was an era where, like, women didn't work, and men, worked during the week in the city or in Brooklyn or, New Jersey, and then would drive up and do this long drive up to the Catskills. And women, nowadays, like, that just isn't the case. That wouldn't happen. Many women work and would not be able to, and like, nobody can really park themselves for an entire summer in a place without great Wi-Fi. So
Exactly.
I
Although
have
people do
been,
park themselves in the Hamptons for the summer. I mean, it's a little bit different. It's a modern experience, but
yeah, no, of course. And the Catskills are having a revival now. They are. It's like Catskills 2.0, which we can talk about. But I have been there. I went for book research just to, like, drive around and understand, like, even I just wanted to, like, smell the air and to see the trees, and just get like a vibe, especially for, like, the modern Catskills. And then I went in the early 90s with my family to Kutcher's, which Kutcher's was like one of the big resorts. And my parents took us there, like, maybe 3 times, I would say. Not in this, I don't even think we went in the summer. I know one time we definitely went in the winter, because I remember there was snow and there was like a tiny little ski hill, and a place to go sledding. And then I think another time was maybe Passover. As a child, at that point, I would have been like 12.
Mhm.
I couldn't see, maybe it was mid 90s. I think I was like 14. I didn't notice. I wasn't a discriminating hotel guest. Like, I wasn't noticing that the carpet was like threadbare and that the bedding wasn't very nice. My parents noticed it. And, they were like, ah, like, especially because they remembered the Catskills of their youth and how it was so, like, shishi
Oh,
and
glossy.
high end. And I didn't notice as a child at all. For me, I was like, this is amazing. Like, they give you a printed schedule every day, and there's like fun stuff. And my parents, who are were very overprotective of me as a child, and were very much like, you can't, ride your bike. You can't this, you can't that. Like, we need to watch you at all times. They let me, like, I got to the hotel and they kind of were like, go. Like, it was something I never experienced before, with my parents, who are always like watching me every 2 seconds. But there was like we're surrounded by all Jewish families, and this is familiar, and we know so many people here. And so for the first time ever on a vacation, my parents were like, go find the activities, go find the other children, And I just felt like such freedom and like safety that I had never felt before. And I think that it was, not to say that bad things didn't happen in the Catskills, of course, but it was like going home. Like, I felt at home, and it was like, wow, this is like all familiar people. And so now, of course, like, when I watch that, there's a great documentary, Welcome to Kutcher's, that I highly, highly recommend to people to watch. It's short. It's maybe an hour and a half, and it's available on Amazon Prime, Netflix. Like, they really interview the family. It's the documentary is only maybe like 5 years old, and it's about the decline.
Mhm.
And they talk about the glory days, and they talk about bringing, Wilt Chamberlain and other huge celebrities, athletes, to perform and to entertain the guests. And of course, Kutcher's had like a very popular sleepaway camp, and it's heartbreaking, but they talk about, like, people didn't show up anymore, and they just couldn't afford. These hotels covered like tremendous amount of grounds, and just to pay for the maintenance of all that acreage, like, they couldn't keep it up.
Right. And going back to what you were saying about the sense of freedom that children can have in a place like that, you really communicate that through the different generations of kids in the book, starting with Brian and Peter and Amy, and then finally in the end with Charlie and Ben. That sense that they can go get into mischief.
I think
I think a lot of families don't really have that place anymore. where the kids can just go year after year, get away, have that mischief, have those experiences. It's really special.
Yeah. I mean, there are places like in the Poconos, I think Woodlock,
Hmm.
which we've been to with our kids. It's like sort of similar. First of all, they're pretty run down, like, and they're not kosher, and it's not like all Jewish people or anything. And but at most, people are going for like a long weekend over President's Day. Their Memorial Day weekend. Like, they're no one's parking themselves for 12 weeks at Woodlock. This idea of going for the whole summer. I don't know. That just, yes, I agree with you. Like, people go to the Hamptons, but they're also in their own homes and they're working, and it's not quite the same.
Yeah.
Like, it's really actually like best said by Midge Maisel, when in the second season where 3 or 4 episodes were shot in the Catskills at the, fictional Steiner Resort, and her agent, who's that like short woman, I don't know if you've seen Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, but she's like a funny woman who's her booker, and her booker's like, okay, I've got you, like, you're going to do this club on July 1st, and you're going to do this club on July 8th. And she's like, what are you talking about? It's the summer. I'm going to the Catskills. And she's like, I'm done. Like, I'll see you in September, but like, I'm out of here, which just was funny.
Right. I think in terms of the book itself too, and the plot, it really is a great frame to take these multi-generations of families, remove them from their regular setting, throw them all together, and then the reader watches as secrets are unraveled and the tension is there. Some of it resolves, some of it doesn't. But I love your characters, and I was wondering, did you have a favorite character or two in this book?
That's funny you say that, because yes, I did like, I have it here. Hang on one second. Do you remember these things at all?
Is it a pencil sharp? No, oh yeah, a little kaleidoscope?
Yeah, they're like these viewfinders. They're like old school viewfinders. And inside I put, like, it's the book cover inside. I made them for the Golden Hotel. So this is like a prototype, but the ones I actually ordered.
Stunning cover, by the way. I love
Thank you. I love the cover. The ones I order say the Golden Hotel, Windsor, New York, and inside is a picture of the book. I bring that up because they're great. It's like, first of all, it's like cheap to make them, and they're great promotional swag for the book. And I ordered like 250 of them. And on Instagram yesterday, or like at some time, maybe I think it was Friday morning, because now I already have like 300 people wanting them. On Friday morning, I did a picture of it, and I also showed the vintage ones from the Concord and Grossinger's, and I said, to win one, like, tell me who your favorite character was in the Golden Hotel. And I used to, because like a lot of people by this point who follow me on Instagram have read the book. Mm-hmm. So I was intrigued that everyone loved Amy. And I really like Amy a lot. And she's probably the character that I relate to the most. For those who haven't read the book yet that are on the call, Amy is like the middle generation. So she's the hotel is owned by 2 families, the Goldmans and the Weingolds. And she is the only child of the Goldmans. And she's middle generation, and she's got, her father's deceased, but her mother is very much alive and a part of her life. And then she has 3 millennial children who are like, giving her gray hair, and there's plenty going on with them. And so I relate to that, of course, because I've got my parents, knock on wood, still alive, but they're Jewish parents, like they, it's work. And I have 3 kids that like are also a lot of work in a different way. And so I feel like very, very squeezed the way Amy does, and I relate to her the most. That said, like, I don't know if I would have picked her as my favorite character, because she's kind of the straight man. Like, there isn't,
mm-hmm. Right.
Like, she's just very like normal. Like, there's, she's very relatable for sure, but she's not like particularly funny or, particularly quirky. For me, like, I love Louise. Louise is the grandmother. She's like my fictional version of Jenny Grosinger. Jenny Grosinger, who's long gone, is like the public face of the Catskills. Like, if you could pick one owner who symbolized the Catskills, it was Jenny Grosinger. She was a force of nature, and she got up there to greet the guests. Like, she was married, but like her husband was more of a backstage guy, and she was out there like, welcoming everyone to the Memorial Day barbecue, and, closing out the summer and welcoming all the celebrity guests, and first pictures of her with like, Grace Kelly and Elizabeth Taylor, and she sat next to the celebrities when they came. And Louise Goldman in my book is like the beauty, the charm. She's the one who's like the public face. And so I really like her because I like that. I like writing that sort of glamorous woman who doesn't have a hair out of place and has, you know, the red nails and lots of opinions. And she's just like, but she's not bad. Like there's, you know, she might be into all that stuff, but she has like her heart in the right place. And I also have like a special fondness for the grandchildren because I really didn't want to dismiss these 21-year-olds, 22-year-olds as like vapid Gen Z, vapid millennials. Like it's important to me like not to dismiss like an entire generation as like only caring about Instagram and TikTok. And I teach that age group, and like they are very three-dimensional people, you know, and I feel like the generation gets a bad rap. So I have like a fondness for all the grandchildren in the book too.
One thing I really loved about this book was that maybe it was especially good as a summer read is it really made me want to, I rooted for all the characters, maybe with the exception of Roger. Everybody had some redeeming qualities. And you really, as you were going, like wanted to see those things win out. You wanted tensions to resolve for each of them in their own unique set of circumstances. They're also compelling. They're also human. And I loved, there was a line in the book that there would always be tension between old and new. And I love that both in terms of how the characters related to each other, but also, you know, of course, the hotel and it being a little bit outdated, but the new iteration of it at the end and the Golden Motel. But I love that idea between the tension of old and new as each of the characters sort of moved into a different stage of their life, both in relation to other members of their family, in terms of their own professions, in terms of their own relationships. But I thought you wove a great story for each of the characters, and you really got into each one of them. They were so human. You know, you really wanted Amy to land somewhere good after she had the bad experience with Roger. You wanted Louise to retain her elegance. You know, in the end, I don't want to be a spoiler for anybody who hasn't read the book or hasn't finished, but you know, even with Benny and Amos, when you know, there are these sort of this underlying plot twist about what really happened in the finances of the hotel, you want it to resolve in a positive way. And I thought you just did such a nice job of that.
Thank you. No,
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. I mean, this is meant to be like, it is a feel good, but you know, a feel good book also has to have complication. Like otherwise it's just not realistic. So there's tension and like all the characters have like a lot of good qualities. They have flaws. They're just like us, you know, like nobody's going to relate to a character in a book, maybe like Rabbi Babbage, because he's a rabbi and he's all good inside. But like the rest of us are, you know, like we have our sins, you know, and so to relate to people in a book, like they need to have some flaws and they need to make mistakes and they need to think things that aren't like, listen, like in the Jewish world, like we want to see our children settled, you know? And like, I think it's very honest to admit that like, if you have like single grandchildren or single children, and every time you hear of someone else getting like engaged, you're happy for them. But there's a moment of like, when's it like our family's turn or when's it my turn? And like, I like to write about that because I want people to feel not alone in having these thoughts. Like envy is very normal. I think like malaise and being unsure of like where you are in your life. And even if you've been given a lot of gifts in your life to still feel unappreciative at times, like those are very normal things to like, you know, be irritated by your spouse or find your children irritating. Like I admit, I'm just very open book. So when I have 3 kids in sleepaway camp, and when people are like, you must be so excited for them to come home, I'm like, no, actually, like I wish camp was a week longer, you know, like I've always been that way. I'm very open, you know? And so I think that's probably why I'm drawn to being a writer. Cause like, I want to share how I feel. Not that every thought of every character in my books is mine, then I would literally be a schizophrenic person with 10 personalities. But I like, you know, sort of airing the dirty laundry in a way, but of course, like in a respectful, you know, boundaried way. I want people to say like, okay, it's normal to feel that way. Like it's normal to find your children irritating. Like it's normal to want to like strangle your spouse like once a month. You know, like these are normal feelings. It's normal to feel jealous when like someone else gets the job that you wanted your child to get, you know?
100%, 100%. I think people are always fascinated with authors and the process of book writing. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that. I mean, for example, when you started the book, how much of the plot did you already have hashed out in your head? How much evolved as you were writing?
So I say this to my writing students, like you have, I tell them, like I teach over the course of a semester and they're like, I probably have three overarching goals for them. Like I'd like them to learn more than three things. But one of the three that I really want them to figure out by the end of the semester is whether they're someone who needs an outline or they're someone who is better at free writing, because writers are rarely both. Like now that I've written 4 novels, like I have a lot of writer friends. I've never met a writer who's like, well, my second novel, I did a very detailed outline, but my third novel, I just free wrote. I'm sure it exists. I've never talked to anyone. Like my writer friends fall into 2 camps, and very clearly 2 camps. There are what they call in the writing, the lingo in the writing world is a plotter or a pantser. A plotter, it's very obvious. They plot the story. A pantser flies by the seat of their pants. And it's very important for me, for my students, that they figure out which one they are. Like they should try both for an assignment and see which one feels natural. For me, I am 10,000 times a pantser. I cannot be boxed into an outline. People say, how's that possible? You wrote a book with 12 characters. Like, how in the world did you do this without an outline? An outline to me is like putting me into a 17th century corset. Like I feel so constricted and I have no freedom and no creativity. Like, in fact, it's hard for me when I wrote my first book. The way it works with novels, like for a first book, like you have to have written the entire thing and then you go out and get an agent and a publisher. But for like future novels, you know, once you're established, you just submit an outline and then they'll offer you maybe an outline in 1 chapter, and they will make you an offer based on your outline and your 1 or 2 chapters. I can't do it. I'm like, I cannot turn in an outline. Like we are now at the point basically where my agent writes my outlines for me. I tell her loosely, like we'll have lunch. I'm like, this is what I want the book to be about. She writes an outline. I get an offer. I never even open her outline, look at it, anything. And then I write the book I want to write. And I understand, like a publisher, it's hard to just be like, no, I got this. Don't worry. You know, like it's all up here. It's going to come out. Don't worry. But I can't, good ideas don't come to me in outline. They come to me as I'm actually writing the sentences of the novel. As far as like the hotel and the plot of the hotel being like, are they going to keep the hotel and try to salvage it and modernize it and renovate it, or are they going to sell it to the casino developer? I did not know what to do until I got there.
Like the vote that the family takes, right? You just don't know what's going to happen.
It weighed on me as much as I'm a pantser, and I'm like, that stressed me out because that's different than like, what should happen in this scene? You know, I'll figure it out when I get there. That's like a massive plot, you know, decision. So that did weigh on me that I hadn't decided. And then it did come to me when I got to the place. But until I got there, I felt like I was losing sleep over that. I would lie in bed at night and like my head would be like spinning, trying to figure out like what would make more sense and what would be more satisfying to the reader and what would be better for the story. And like, I felt a little kind of ill over it. And then I won't give it away, but like, I personally am very, very happy with the, you know, resolution in the book. Like I have regrets. There are things in the book I'm like, oh, if I did it over, I would change this or that. I would not change the ending.
And in fairness to you, I mean, I think that you were probably having that angst because it was such a hard decision for the family. And I think that's what helped you to write it so well, that you were really feeling for them. They didn't know what to do, and I won't give it away either, but whether to sell the hotel or whether to keep the hotel.
Well, it was not an obvious choice.
And the reader doesn't know what's going to happen. And that's what, you know, builds that suspense and that tension. And I agree with you. I thought it was a very good resolution. Going back to your comment about your editor helping you with the outline, one of the members of our listening audience asked, could you do this book without an editor and literary agent? What part did they play?
I mean, there's like a whole self-publishing world out there, but I'm not a part of it. And yeah, I mean, there are definitely people who write books on their own and navigate the process of finding a printer, or maybe they just do an electronic version and they work with Amazon. I have not done that. Like I've always been part of the traditional publishing world, which for me works better for me. I like that they provide me someone to do the cover. They do the editing, the copy editing, they do the distribution channels to make sure I get into stores. Like it's just for me, it's better. But there are people who don't have the time to try to find a literary agent, or it's very hard to get one. Like it's a very competitive process, and some people who don't want to wait and don't want to face like all the rejection that's part of being a writer, like they go the self-publishing route, and sometimes it works out very well, but
Mhm.
certainly like more of an uphill battle.
Yeah. And so when you do finally get an editor, is it common that they, I mean, do you go to them with the idea for the book? Do they push ideas at you? How does that work?
I know I come to them with the idea,
Yeah.
and they maybe finesse it, and we discuss, you know, maybe how the market, like the shape of the market now and what there's an appetite for. And maybe we'll talk, like they might have knowledge of what else is coming in the pipeline. So, I might have an idea and they're like, okay, but that's, there are 6 books coming out, that we know of already that are, similar. And so you should like, they have more insight into the industry than I do. So and then there's like editorial finessing, that's too many characters, or I think you should set it like in, you shouldn't set it in present day. You should set it in the 60s, like, those kinds of conversations.
Yeah. How were you affected with both the Floating Feldmans and this book in terms of COVID?
So the Floating Feldmans, very little. That came out in the summer of 2019. I had probably like 5 events canceled. Like I book events for usually like the entire calendar year. Um, but most of them were in the fall. So the book came out in the summer, July. I did some summer events. I did a lot of fall events, some winter events. My last thing was an event in Los Angeles I did in February of 2020. Came back from that trip. Like the writing was definitely on the wall that was going to have been the last event. I pivoted, some of them pivoted to virtual, the ones that I had planned for the spring, some were just canceled. But as far as book sales for Floating Feldmans, like they was very much not affected, because like the bulk of the sales happened in the first few months of the book being out. And that was like way before COVID. And now again, like I got lucky. The worst were for authors who had books coming out last spring. I mean, that was awful. Like there was no, I mean, I do think that people read a lot during the pandemic, but those first few months, there was no appetite for like, all you did was watch the press conferences every day and worry. It was just such a time of angst and watching the news. I mean, I think by the summer things had settled and people were more like, their brains had more capacity for reading.
Right.
The books that came out in the spring, like really universally like failed. It was bad.
Yeah. Are there book tours again? I was thrilled. I think I emailed you that I was thrilled to see your book in an independent bookstore outside of the city. But the books are out, but are people able to do like gatherings? Is everything by Zoom? What's going on with that?
It's a mix. I have like, I would say country clubs are booking me for events. Like they're full steam. So I'm going to a country club in a couple weeks in Westchester, and that'll be an outdoor activity, but they bought a lot of books from my publisher and they're doing it as a member event. And I did one of those a few weeks ago. Like those are definitely frequent. Most synagogues are doing virtual. I have a handful, like 1 or 2 JCCs that reached out to me and they booked me and they said they want to decide virtual or in person as it gets closer to the event. And as long as they're close by, like one of them was in New Jersey, I'm like, you can literally tell me the day before, like it does. I'm 45 minutes away. Like you just tell me the day before and that's fine. I mean, it also depends a little bit on like the state. Like there's a bookstore in Texas that like really wants to bring me in person. Like Texas is a more open,
Right.
so they're more open and want, Virginia Beach, like I'm doing an event in person. That's like a much more, I guess, less of like a cautious COVID community.
Right.
But like it's probably like at least more than half of my events are virtual, which like it's not that great, you know?
Yeah, yeah, it's nice to make the personal connection, although it certainly opens it up to a broader audience than it might. I mean, people who aren't geographically close then have the opportunity to participate, I suppose.
It definitely like is getting me to communities that like probably couldn't have afforded to bring me out because they have to fly me, and it's like there are a lot of like little synagogues that are they just don't have the budget for that. And so yes, like that brings me to them. But for the most part, I do think it helps me reach a wider audience, but there's just screen fatigue at this point. Like I think that people were very, very grateful, of course, for the virtual events, you know, and they got a huge turnout. But I think at this point, like it's just very hard, you
People
know?
are ready for some human contact again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I love your sense of humor, and I found so many of the jokes in this book. I mean, I literally was laughing out loud. I love the thing about renaming World War II to be the war that killed 6 million Jews. And I love it's so apropos to a book about the Borscht Belt. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about whether you see this as a Jewish book, so to speak, with universal Jewish themes, and how that affects your reading audience. Like, is this a book that's going to appeal more to a Jewish audience? Do you see it as something that has an open, broad appeal? And when you're putting a book like this out there, how you sort of think about that?
So the one of the most gratifying things and one of the most heartwarming things, and like this is something I really want this community who's on to absorb, the reception from the non-Jewish community has been unbelievable, 100% unequivocally positive. And it reached a very non-Jewish audience because it was on Good Morning America they pick a book every Friday to recommend, and they pick this book. And that, of course, you know, it's Good Morning America. So naturally it reached like a huge audience, not a Jewish audience.
Congratulations.
It was also a what's the word I'm looking for? Book of the month selection for May. That's also like a very, you know, non I mean, of course there are Jewish members, but like it's the geographically spread. It has a huge readership and all that. So I have to tell you, I'm so amazed when I go online and I read like so and so in, you know, Louisville, Kentucky, and so in like Benton, Arkansas. Is like, I love this book and I love learning about the Jewish culture. I didn't know anything about the Borscht Belt. I didn't realize Dirty Dancing was set at a Jewish hotel. I had no idea. The Jewish representation was so interesting, and I just want to learn more. It's like, especially after like what happened, you know, in May with the Gaza conflict and all the massive increase in anti-Semitism, violent attacks that happened in the spring. I'm not saying there aren't anti-Semitic people out there, but there are a lot of people who are really decidedly not anti-Semitic at all, and like are so excited to learn about Jewish culture, and I have like wonderful things to say about it. So I can't, it's been 100% positive reception from the non-Jewish community.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
I'm really, really happy about that. And I don't know how my readers, like, I don't know what the breakdown is, you know, of like who's Jewish and reading and who's not, other than to say that like I'm certain that this has reached like a very large audience that's not Jewish, because like I don't think it's like a universally Jewish book. I think it's a universal like family book. And in
Mhm.
Catskills, there were areas of like Italians, there were hotels that were just for Italian people, there was a Greek area, like there were, you know, similar communities for different religions and ethnic groups.
Right. Right. And really that's the theme of the book, how these relationships within families play out, how those secrets are held, how they come out, how families either break over them or unite around them. And you tell those stories in such a human way, I thought. So I could see that there really is universal appeal there. These are all things that all families experience and go through: a coming out, a broken relationship, parents passing away. So that's great. Are you on to your next project?
Yep. So I have another book coming out next fall. It's called Most Likely. It's not a Jewish book. I mean, there is a Jewish character in the book, and there are some, you know, like there's some bar mitzvah stuff going on, but It's about four women who reunite at their 25th high school reunion and have like a reckoning with where they are in their lives and decide to make some changes because they are not where they thought they would be 25 years out of high school. So it's about like figuring out what will make you happy, realizing how priorities change from the time you're young, and sort of like tackling the question of like, can a woman have it all? And
Mhm.
also like still has plenty of humor because that's sort of like my thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the humor. So let me ask you, um, how much in these in the characters is based on your own experience? You talked about wanting to share, but obviously, if you're writing the character of a 70-year-old woman, that's not an experience you've had before. If you're writing about a 20-year-old boy, obviously, that's not an experience you've had. How hard is it to put yourself in the shoes of somebody totally different than you, or just with an experience you haven't lived?
I mean, that's really the fun. Like, I'm not saying it comes easily, but that's the part I like the most. Though I do sometimes worry. Like, I'm always surprised when people of that era, like if it's like a 75-year-old woman is like, you got it, you totally nailed it. Like you really understood. Like I felt like so amazed that you were so young writing this. And I'm like always sort of pleasantly surprised by that because when I'm writing Amy, I like feel that it comes more naturally. And so, and like as I'm writing this new book, most likely one of the four characters, well, one of the four women has a more similar situation to mine. Like she's a married mother with a career and three children. So she's me, you know, demographic, like we line up. And I do feel like writing her chapters is easier. Like I think about what goes on in my daily life and then I put it into the book. The other three are more of a stretch for me. They are, you know, a divorced woman with one child, a woman, a non-straight woman with no children. Like they're different. And one is like a massive entrepreneur with $1 billion company. Like I can't relate to that. And those chapters are harder for me, but somehow I guess I work really hard at it because somehow it works. Like maybe it's harder, but I put more effort in. And so it ends up being okay because I do feel like the feedback has been really good from people who read it, who line up with those characters that aren't like me, but they line up with them and they're like, how did you do that? Like you had the lingo right and you really understood like our feelings and what we think. And I guess like I'm a good listener. So,
Mhm.
you know, I draw like to write like a 22-year-old, like I teach 22-year-olds. So that helps, you know, and like to write like a grandma, like my mom's a grandma, you know, and I listen to what she says. So, you know, it's not the same as being
Observing.
a person, but it's just listening a lot.
As a writing teacher, are there any key fundamental tips you give your students?
It's probably like the biggest thing that a teacher would tell a student is to show, like you say, show, don't tell. Like, don't say you're a much better writer the more concrete and specific you are, and the more detail you can provide. So you don't want a writer be like, Jane was a very happy woman. You know, Jane was a happy and calm woman. Like that doesn't land as much and that doesn't resonate as much as like, show us she's happy. Like tell us that she wakes up every morning with like a smile before she even brushes her teeth, you know, tell us she's calm by showing us that like when she got bad news at the doctor that like her heart rate didn't even accelerate, you know, like there are, the more concrete your details are and the more you show the way somebody is rather than just using like vague adjectives, the more effective your writing will be. Because like calm can mean a lot of things to a lot of people and happy can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. But when you get more, you know, specific, that's or like show it through a line of dialogue, like that's a lot more like revelatory to the reader.
Uh-huh. Speaking of showing, I couldn't help but think that this would make a great movie. And I was wondering if you've ever looked into having either the Floating Feldmans or this book be developed as something that could go on screen.
I mean, I have a film agent, but so far no bites. So I wish. I mean,
I'm rooting for you. It would be a great movie. I can just feel myself watching this on Netflix.
I think so. I wish. I don't know why it hasn't sold yet. It's like it's disappointing because I do think it would be great on screen.
Uh-huh. Are there any special challenges to having, I mean, I'm not in the know about how that process works when you're shopping a book to be made a movie, or how does that work exactly?
I don't. yeah, I actually, other than having the agent, like I have no
Yeah,
idea.
got it, got it, got it. Well, let's hope it happens.
Above my pay grade, and I just sit by my phone waiting for good news, but so far, no.
Right. Well, we're rooting for it too. Are there any particular authors you've read this summer that you would recommend, or in general, authors that you really love?
I bounce around a lot. I find that if I read a book by an author that I really, really love, I can be sort of disappointed then when I get to their next book and I feel like it doesn't live up to
Mhm.
the last one. I also get excited like to bounce around authors. I've read a lot this summer, but most of it's not out yet because I get asked to write
Oh,
blurbs for other books. So, but I did read, I guess one of the very big books of the summer is Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which was a Reese Witherspoon or a Jenna Bush, one of those big book club selections, which I thought was good. I thought that was a good, interesting book. Gosh, it's like really everything I've read has is other than that is literally not been published and won't be published for another year. But like some old standbys, like I love Richard Russo. I think he's an amazing writer, and I've read many of his books. Oh, I like Leanne Moriarty. I think she's very good.
that's Big Little Lies, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yes, I think she's consistently very, very good. So I recommend her a lot. I like Jennifer Weiner. I think she's a great writer and she handles like she tackles Jewish issues in almost every book of hers. So I think she's quite good. Yeah, I don't know. I think about it. I
Yeah,
haven't-
well, I remember part of the reason I was asking is I remembered from the last Zoom you did with us that you just read a tremendous amount. I think you said you read a book a week, which would
Well,
be aspirational for all of us.
not always. It depends if I get like, it depends if my kids are around. It depends how good the book is. I mean, I do try to read a lot and I really enjoy it. And I read on my phone also. Like I have the Kindle app. So like even
Yeah.
if like 3 minute spurts, like I'll find
Right.
that I read, even when I have like just a few minutes.
Yeah, yeah, so great. With your writing, is that something you do every day? I mean, do you make yourself spend a certain number of hours when you're in the middle of a book working on it, or do you write when bursts of inspiration come to you? How does that
I would
process?
love to write every day, but I can't. I really wish. Like I find I'm so busy with like the promotional aspects of the job and I would love that. I want to just sit at my computer and be calm and write, but between the kids and the promotion of the book and just running life and family, like I would love that. That would be my dream. To just sit and be able to write 2 or 3 hours a day. But unfortunately, like it's usually crammed. I go days without writing, which I hate, but I have no choice. And then it's often like crammed just trying to make a deadline at the end.
Mhm, mhm. Do you do all of it on a computer? Do you ever use a journal for handwriting?
Always computer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Terrible handwriting. I hate writing. It's computer, computer.
yeah. Any notes by the side of your bed?
I wake up in the middle of the night with inspiration and I have my phone by my bed, so I email myself in the middle of the night. I've definitely had some great, I even dream sometimes about my books and then I wake up and if I'm lucky enough to remember an idea, then I send it to myself in an email. So I've many, if you look at my inbox, like many of the senders are me.
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I think we're all looking forward to the next book. And I know Rabbi Babbage wants to say something also, but I just want to thank you and William so much for everything you both have done for the shul. William's commitment to the building has just been above and beyond. But we really feel that your family as a whole is so special to the shul. We're looking forward to interviewing you about your next book. They're
Thank you.
so full of life and so vibrant. And like I said, I'm just waiting for it to come out on Netflix. These are wonderful stories. And I just want
Yeah.
to thank you so much for your time this
Thank
morning.
you. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure.
Yes,
Rabbi.
I want to echo Rachel's words and thank you. I did also grow up going to the Catskills when I was a kid. I've been to Kutcher's, and there's something very sweet and comforting about the region. Till this day, I always like to go every summer with the family. But since I grew up there and have nostalgia, I can't say everyone in the family gets it, and because it's a little bit worn down today. But you did make reference to a revival. So I want to know what you heard, because first of all, you may not know, may know, may not know that the Legoland just opened up in the Catskills this summer, which is going to bring a lot of young families to the region. And someone else I know is working on a very large project, a high-end project in the area. So I was curious what you heard about the future of the region.
So there's already a revitalization happening, not exactly in the location where the Borscht Belt was, but maybe like 30 minutes away. There are a bunch of hotels that are like cool, hip, very Brooklyn, Williamsburg, hipster, like young families who are like, I would just say cooler than me and William, you know, they're like a different kind of type of person, you know, and they are definitely vacationing in the Catskills. It's like everything farm to table or organic, like all the activities I talk about in the Golden Hotel that the grandchildren have ideas like goat yoga and learning to make craft beer and, you know, artisanal cheese making and milking a cow and like all these sort of very Instagrammable things. Like 2 resorts that are up there now, Scribner's Catskill Lodge and the Roxbury Hotel are both like very busy, very booked. But they're not like, you know, it's not a place where like old ladies play canasta. Like it's young families or young couples going and having like experiences that are great for like posting on Instagram or just enjoyable in general, but it's like more what they're, you know, it's a lot of hiking. It's like a very active type of thing. I mean, there's a ton of great hiking in the region. So basically it is a revitalization and there is renewed interest in the region, and it's a more affordable to buy land there, and you can have more land than you can have at like the Jersey Shore, or you could have in Atlantic Beach or the Hamptons, you know. So if you, it's a great summer alternative, and not everyone wants the beach. I mean, some people love lakes and they love mountains, and that's like a totally different topography there. So there is it's not, the Borscht Belt is not coming back. Like I can say that with confidence, you know, but I do think that the region is not as blighted as it once was.
Right. Yeah. They say the airplanes is what killed the Catskills, but it does seem like there's new projects I'm developing. So it could be that maybe.
Yeah. Well, it's not that far from Manhattan,
right,
and it's really physically beautiful. So it should have. You know, there's no reason it shouldn't.
Okay, maybe one day we'll have a synagogue weekend there.
We passed synagogues when we went up there. I mean, tiny, like Stiebel, like little, you know, nothings, but like they're there.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. Okay, thank you so much once again. It's always a treat to have you, and thank everyone for joining us. And I'll give it over to Rachel to conclude this morning's program.
Sure. Well, just a thank you to all the audience. Keep your eyes open for our next book event. And to Elyssa, thank you so very much again for spending Sunday morning with us. Good luck with your book.
Have a great rest of your weekend, everybody. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.